Hello and welcome. Today is a big video. I'm doing a full face and full brand overview of Westman Atelier featuring the new powder that they've come out with. This is called the Vital Pressed Skincare Powder. So I'm going to be featuring this and sharing my review of this, but I'm also going to be showing all of the other Westman Atelier products that I have, which is quite an enormous collection, I have to say, and applying a full face of Westman Atelier products while sharing my thoughts on each item as I go. So if you'd like to see all of that, just keep on watching. So I've got my skincare down and I did a little bit of the Chanel green corrector just on areas that were particularly red. And then I actually put a tiny little bit of the lit up highlight stick in Nectar under my eyes. I just kind of patted it there. And I think my eyes can use a little bit of a stronger corrector today. So I'm going to go in with the Charlotte Tilbury corrector in the shade Fair and just tap a little bit of that under my eyes too, just to kind of lighten those shadows there. And I've done my brows already too. So I'm going to be using the Westman Atelier foundation, of course, in this video, but I often like to prime for that foundation with the lit up highlight stick. So that's what I'm going to do now. And I'm going to use the shade Lit, which is this more iridescent shade. I have the 4 shades of lit up highlight stick swatched on my hand here. So this one is Lit, which I'm going to use as my primer today. This one here is Nectar, which is a little bit more of a peachy tone, which is what I have under my eyes. And then up here is the shade Pärla, which was in their holiday box in 2021. I think their box is still available on the Westman Atelier website. It includes this highlighter as well as one of the lip suedes that I'll show you later. It's a really good box. So if you still find yourself quite interested in it, I definitely recommend considering getting it because it's really excellent and has 2 of my favorite Westman Atelier products in it. I have a video on that box that I will try to remember to link below. And then this last shade up here, this much darker one, is the shade Brûlée, which is really meant as a highlight for deeper skin tones, but I like to use it sometimes as a cream bronzer type of product, a really nice glowy kind of dewy cream bronzer. But let's get started going in with Lit first. So I just like to swipe it on the areas that I want that little bit of extra illumination and hydration and just tap it in with my fingers. This is a great primer for more matte foundations. I really love it with the Lisa Eldridge foundation. It's a perfect primer for that as well. But today, of course, we're using the Westman Atelier foundation. This is the Vital Skin Foundation Stick. I have it in 2 shades. I have the shades N and 0. So N is actually a little bit lighter than 0. And you'll see when I swatch them here that it's a little bit more cool toned, a little bit rosier. And 0 is a little bit more slightly yellowish. So this one here is 0 and this one here is N. Both of these are actually a little bit too dark for me in the winter time when my skin is very, very pale. But I find that now that I have a little bit of fake tan going on, I like the shade 0 as my main foundation color. And then I can go in with N and just brighten up certain areas like under the eyes. So I'm going to focus mainly with the shade 0. And Westman Atelier does have a foundation brush, which I have. This is what it looks like. All of the Westman Atelier brushes are synthetic fibers and they're handmade in Japan. They're very pricey, and overall, in general, I don't really think that their brushes are worth the price. I understand the artisanship that goes into them, but I think in terms of functionality, you can get just as good quality and functionality with something like the Spectrum brushes. I have the Spectrum KJH collaboration, and those brushes to me are right on par with the Westman Atelier brushes in terms of functionality and quality and user experience. The one possible exception to that is the blender brush from Westman Atelier. This is definitely my favorite Westman Atelier brush, and the one that I think is the most special, and I don't really have anything else that is quite like this. I love this for foundations, particularly really kind of thinner, lighter weight foundations. To me, this is the perfect tool for blending out that type of a product. Just gives such a flawless, seamless finish, really, really soft, and I love how kind of flexible it is. It has a good length of those fibers, so it gives you a really nice flexibility and flow. But there are a couple of brushes that I have that are quite similar to that, one being the Merit foundation brush. It's not quite a flat top, it has a little bit of an angle, and the bristles I find are a little bit shorter, so there's not as much of a flow, but it's a very good alternative to the Westman Atelier blender brush. And even something like the Say, I can't remember the name of this brush, but this is their kind of bronzing brush. This has a similar shape and function and could be a good alternative to the Westman Atelier blender brush as well. The Westman Atelier blender brush is extremely expensive. It's definitely the most expensive brush I have in my collection, and that's including all of my big Sonia G brushes. So it's definitely an investment, and I don't know that it's fully worth that extremely high price tag. But for me, I'm really glad that I have it, and I use this quite a lot. It's definitely my go-to, even over the ones that I have that are similar to it. Now back to the foundation brush. I actually don't like using this with the Westman Atelier foundation, particularly if I have primed with something like a lit up highlight stick. I just find it gives a really streaky application that doesn't ever really resolve itself without having to go in with another tool like a sponge or something to blend out all the streaks. So this is not my favorite for any foundation really, but even for the Westman Atelier foundation. So I've decided that today I'm gonna go in with the Sonia G brush. This is her mini base brush, which I think works really nicely for this foundation. So I'm just gonna go right into the bullet like that. Just begin kind of swiping and blending and buffing the product in, starting off where I feel I want the most coverage. I think that's enough of Atelier 0, and now I'm going to go in with Atelier N and just do a little bit under the eyes and just anywhere where I want a little bit of brightening. All right, so there is the foundation all done. Gives a really nice, flawless, yet still natural finish. I'd say it can get to about a medium coverage. You can definitely make it a little lighter depending on how much of the product you apply and how much you really blend it out. It blends really easily and beautifully, I think, especially on a well-hydrated base. And in the past, I found it to be around a medium range in terms of the longevity. It does kind of start to fade around the 4 or 5 hour mark without setting it. But I find now with the powder in the mix, it lasts much better all day long. It still fades a little bit. I did a full face of Westman Atelier yesterday. I was going to film it, but I just wasn't in the right frame of mind to do that. So I just decided to wear a full face, kind of test this look out and how everything was going to wear together. And I found it wore really nicely through the whole day. It did fade a little bit by the time I took it off, which was probably around the 8 hour mark, but it still looked really nice. Nothing looked bunched up. Just looked kind of naturally like the product had sunken a little bit more into my skin as time went on. So now that I've got the base on, I think it's a good idea to go into contour, and for that I'm going to be using their Face Trace contour stick. I have the shade Biscuit, which is a really beautiful contour shade for fair to light skin tones. That's what the shade looks like. So you can see it is a little bit cool. It's got a little bit of a gray, kind of purpley undertone to it, but it doesn't look too cool or too gray, and it gives a really nice natural looking contour. For this, I am actually going to use the foundation brush. I find that this brush is pretty good for doing something like contour because you have the option to do a really fine application if you apply it like that, and then you can kind of blend it out a little bit more using the wider angle of the brush. So here we have one side contoured and the other side without contour. There's the contour all done. I applied it fairly subtly today because I know I'm going to be going in with bronzer, and actually maybe I'll use a little bit of Brûlée as well. So I didn't want to use too much because I know I'm going to be building more and more color. But right now is where I want to introduce the powder. So I did a full brand overview and full face of Westman Atelier probably about a year and a half ago on my channel. And I think my main takeaway from that was that I liked all the products, but I didn't necessarily like them all together. I just found that they didn't wear all that well together. I found it was perhaps a little bit too much creaminess going on without enough powder to kind of set things down in between the layers and just hold things in place the way that I wanted them to. So I really feel like this powder was a missing piece in the Westman Atelier line. And I think that now with the incorporation of the powder in a full face of Westman Atelier, I do like all of the products together. Everything just stays together a little bit better. And I feel that I have more control over how things are blending and how everything is wearing. So I'm going to use the Westman Atelier powder brush for this. Again, this is a good brush, but I just don't necessarily think that it is worth it, but since I have it, I'm going to use it with the powder. I do like it actually with this powder. I don't find that it works all that well with the bronzer, which I will be using later, which is also a powder product. I just always find that when I use this powder brush with the powder bronzer, I need to go in afterwards with a buffing brush or another natural hair brush to really blend everything out. But I do like it with the powder. So I have the translucent shade of the powder, and I'm going to be using this throughout the rest of the look at various points to set down certain areas and certain layers of product. Let's go right in here. I decided to go with the translucent shade because the other shade I was considering was Pink Bubble, and I just was a little bit concerned that it would show up too pink. And I also watched Michelle Wong's review, and she had compared the translucent shade to the Pink Bubble shade in terms of their brightening properties, and she found, and I found looking at her footage as well, that actually the white translucent shade looked more brightening than the pink shade. So I figured this would be the safest bet for me, and I'm really enjoying it. So let's go on and see what this can do. So comparing this side, which has powder on it, to this side, I don't know if it's going to pick up that well on camera, but my pores are totally blurred out where I've set it with powder, and I can still see my pores poking through on the other side. It does kind of tamp down the shine a little bit. It very slightly mattifies, but I really don't feel like it's totally taking away all of the radiance, which is perfect. That's what I love in a powder for the most part. Maybe I'll just put a tiny little bit right along there. With this powder, you can kind of just pat it in. You don't have to necessarily buff and blend it in, but you can do that as well. You can kind of do a combination of both or whatever you feel works best for you. I want to powder over my brows too, just because sometimes my brow product can bleed a little bit, and setting with powder really helps deal with that. And let's powder the other side now. I think I'm going to set my contour too, because I want to go in with the powder bronzer next. And now you can see I've set my whole face, and it feels set, very lightly set. But there's still a little bit of a glow and a radiance coming through. So now let's go in with the bronzer. This is their Beauty Butter bronzer. I think they have just 2 shades of this. I was thinking 3, but I think that's the contour stick that they have 3 shades. So just 2 shades of this bronzer. I have the lighter one, which is called Coup de Soleil. This is what it looks like. This is kind of a strange product because I don't know if you can see it there, but mine formed little bumps, and I've seen that happen to other people as well. I still find the product works perfectly well. I don't find that those bumps translate onto the skin or anything, but it's just a little bit of a flaw in this product that I see. However, I do really like this formula, and I really like the color of it as well. That's what the color looks like blended out a little bit. So to me, it has a nice balance of warm and cool, and it doesn't look too orangey on my skin. And you can kind of see it has a very subtle little bit of radiance to it, which I like as well. I'm gonna go in with my Wayne Goss Edit brush. This is the number 1, and just bronze up the skin. So you can see it's quite pigmented, and I find when I first put it on, it looks a little bit scary, but it does blend out really easily, especially if you're using the right kind of brush. And I really prefer a natural fiber brush, or at least one that's really nice and fluffy and flexible, so you can really kind of lightly just blend it all over the skin. I'm gonna keep that on tap because I'm going to be using it a little bit on my eyes as well. And actually, let's move on to eyes right now. So I have tried almost every product from the Westman Atelier range. I think the only things I haven't tried are their mascara and their brow pencil, but I've tried everything else, and I have to say my least favorite of their offerings are their iPods. These are one product in their line that I just really don't think are worth it. I actually bought another little set of these, the Rendezvous set, and ended up returning it because I found the quality to be so subpar in my opinion. The main reason I don't really like this product is because I just find it does not wear well at all. In addition to that, the colors are quite sheer, so it does take a lot of building to get the kind of impact that I want from them. And then I find even within half an hour to an hour of applying, the color and the texture and the finish of the product fades substantially. So I really just don't think these are worth it. Don't really get much product in there, but I know that other people love them. So it's just a matter of personal preference and how it works on your own skin. But for me, these are not great. The set I do have is Les Jours, and I'm going to start out with the kind of mid-range shade in there, which is called Tabac. Which is a really pretty shade. They're kind of a putty formula of eyeshadow, quite interesting, and I think if the payoff were better, if they worked better, I would be more intrigued by these, but because the quality isn't all that great, I'm just not that excited about these. I'm going to use another Westman Atelier brush. This is the Baby Blender, which is actually meant to go with their cream blushes, but I find this rather tiny for blush, so I decided I'd use it as my kind of all over eyeshadow brush today. And I'm just taking that shade Tabac, and I blended a little bit of the foundation up onto my lid, so I'm just patting that out. And then I'm going to basically just apply this all over my eyelid. So that's where I am with 2 layers, taking a good amount from the pot there, and it's still quite sheer. So I'm gonna go in with my finger, which can be a little bit tricky because they're kind of deep into the pots, but I'm able to pick up more product that way. Pat that onto my lid. Going in again with more. And I'll take more on the brush again and blend all of that out. I do think this is a really pretty color. It's kind of like a rosy bronze tone. Taking the same color underneath my eye with the KJH Spectrum number 15 brush. And then I want a little bit of light on my inner corner and brow bone, so I'm going to take this lighter kind of iridescent shade, which is called Neige. Same brush, but I wiped it off. And this does add a really nice shine and iridescence and dimensionality to the look, but unfortunately on me it just doesn't last at all. And then for the final shade in this little trio, it's called Chocolat, a nice deep brown. I'm gonna use the same brush again and really try to load that up on the edge of the brush and use that for a little bit of liner. and then kind of blend into the outer corner and a little bit along the outer part of the lower lash line. Now, something that I find helps a little bit, it makes at least the color of the eyeshadow stay, although that kind of shiny finish doesn't last even with this step. I'm gonna take a little bit of the bronzer. I'm using my Sonia G mini booster brush, little fluffy brush. I'm just going to blend a little bit of that bronzer around the edges, tiny little bit, whatever's left on the brush, over the lid. Do the same on the lower lash line. And that's just gonna set that product in so at least the color stays a little bit better. It's still gonna fade, but at least I'm still going to have that definition around my eyes for the whole day. And it also just kind of softens out the edges and blends out any little creasing and so on. I'm gonna finish off the other eye and put some mascara on. Again, I don't have the Westman Atelier mascara, so I'm gonna use my Wander Beauty, and then I'll come back and we'll finish up with the cheeks and the lips. Eyes are all finished. And now let's move on to blush. I think I'm desperately in need of some color on my cheeks. Before I do that, I need a little bit of moisture on my lips, and I meant to do this at the beginning. Now is a good time to go in with one of the glosses. I'm gonna use the shade New New, which is kind of a light peachy pinky coral type shade, but it really doesn't show up like much on my lips. It's very lightly pigmented, but it does a really great job of just keeping them hydrated before I go in with the lip suede. And these squeaky clean liquid lip balms have a really beautiful scent. They smell like lemonade to me, which is such a nice change from a lot of vanilla glosses, which I like vanilla scents too, but it's just a really refreshing scent. The other shade I have of the squeaky clean lip balm is the shade Nana, which is more of a kind of taupey nude type color, kind of like a mauve taupe. And again, very lightly pigmented. So there's Nana and there's Nunu. The texture of these feels like somewhere in between a gloss and a lip oil. So right in the middle of something like the Merit lip oils, which are very thin and oily feeling, and something like the Victoria Beckham glosses, which are a thicker feeling formula. This is kind of right in the middle, not too thick, not too thin. But the downside for me for these is how lightly pigmented they are. They're not something that I feel necessarily all that comfortable with just on their own, because they're not really giving me a lot of color, at least in these shades that I have. They do have darker shades, but I just haven't tried those ones. So now let's go into blush. As I mentioned, their baby blender is meant to be used with their blushes, but I prefer something bigger. So I'm gonna go in with my Sonia G Classic Base, which is my favorite cream blush brush. I have 3 shades of their blushes. Let me swatch them for you. This one here is Chouchette, which is kind of a nude peach. It's my favorite one. The next one here is Mimi, which was I think a limited edition shade, but I think they're planning to make this permanent at some point. It's more of a kind of nude brownish shade. And then the top one here is Doudou, which is described as a warm rose, but I actually find it to be fairly cool toned, or you could perhaps think of it as a neutral rose. I think that to me is a more accurate description than warm rose, because I see a lot of kind of purpley coolness in that shade. To me, it kind of sits somewhere between a rose and a berry. So I think today I'll start out with Mimi, but I might find that I want a little bit more of a pop, so I might go into one of the other colors after that. But again, I'm just gonna go right onto the bullet with my brush. I find I get the most control that way. And just apply that to the cheeks. So there's Mimi on. I'm actually pretty happy with how that looks, so I think I'm just going to leave it at that color, particularly because I want to go in with one of their Superloaded tinted highlighters. I have 2 shades of these. I have the shade Peau de Peche, which looks like this, more of a kind of nude brownish peach. and the shade Peau de Rosé, which is a cooler toned pink, and it's quite sparkly actually. Now they recently brought out the shade Peau de Santé, which to me looks like the most beautiful shade of this product. I didn't buy it because these are one of the few things in the Westman Atelier line that have hyaluronic acid in them. I bought these long before I discovered my sensitivity to hyaluronic acid, and I actually wore one of these yesterday just to see what would happen. I'm not sure if I reacted to it or not. I kept it on my cheekbones, which is, you know, typically one of the least reactive areas on my face. I've never really broken out in pimples along this area, so I was feeling relatively confident in trying it out there. But I don't know if you noticed, but I have a little area of irritation here, which I'm not sure if it's from these. It could just be a random flare-up, but it's possible that even on this area of my face, the hyaluronic acid caused a bit of an issue for me. But I'm going to throw caution to the wind and go in with one of these today. I'm going to use Peau de Peche. I used Peau de Rosé yesterday, and a big criticism that a lot of people have had with that shade is the sparkles in it, because it is quite kind of glittery. It has more chunky kind of glitters. I really like the shade. I think it's a beautiful color, but interestingly, I found when I wore it yesterday that it looked a little bit too cool toned. So I could see kind of gray silvery tones coming through from it, which I wasn't a huge fan of. So I would say if you wanted a pinkier tone of this highlighter and you haven't bought any yet, probably Peau de Santé would be the best one, because I've heard that that also doesn't have that issue with the kind of chunky glitters. Here's Peau de Peche. Peau de Peche also is not glittery, it just has a beautiful shine and radiance to it. So there's Peau de Rosé and Peau de Peche. I think Peau de Peche will go well with this look since Mimi is a little bit more of a kind of tawny color. Peau de Peche can pair nicely with that. I'm just going to take it on my finger. The blender brush, this big one here that I love for foundation, was actually designed to be used with these Superloaded highlighters, but I don't want it all over my cheeks like that. So I'm just going to use my finger to concentrate it more as kind of something that's going to bridge my blush and highlight area. I'm going to take my damp sponge and just blend. It gives a very 3D effect, really makes the cheekbone pop, but it has that nice color in it too. So I find these to be fairly unique products. And I want to top it off again with one of the lit up sticks. I think I'll go with Pärla and just take a little bit of that on my finger as well, and tap it even a little bit higher up than I had applied Peau de Peche. I know I had thought about applying Brûlée over my bronzer, but I think I've got enough bronziness and color on my cheeks, so I'm just going to leave that one for today. And now let's finally move into the lip suedes. There are currently 3 existing lip suede palettes, and I have all of them here. So this was the limited edition one, which is Le Bordeaux, I think is what it's called. And this was in that holiday set in 2021 that came with Pärla. And this is actually by far my favorite of the lip suedes. I think with this one, you get the best of both worlds of the other 2 lip suedes, because you've got this bright punchy red, you've got a beautiful nude, you have this lovely, really deep berry tone, and then more of a kind of mid-tone rosy. So these blend together really nicely in a huge variety of different combinations. And I just think this is the most useful of the lip suedes. Now, one that I've spoken about very recently on my channel is Le Nude, which is a totally different type of formula than the other 2 lip suedes. The other 2 are a more opaque, kind of soft matte type of feel with a lot of pigment. This one is more of a kind of tinted balm kind of feel. It's a little bit different from a typical tinted balm in that it has a slight kind of powderiness to its appearance, so it's not super shiny like a lot of balms are, but it feels nourishing and moisturizing on the lips like a balm would, and the colors are much more sheer. This one I've actually been loving a lot recently because it just gives me a really nice natural look, and again, you can combine the colors in any way that you want to. And then the last one, which is actually the first one they came out with, is Les Rouges, which is again back to that more opaque formula, but this is certainly my least used. And I think mine is a little bit faulty because the top 3 colors here, the formula is good, but the bottom one, the formula of it actually feels more like Les Nude, which it's not supposed to. So much more sheer color, which is quite unfortunate. Even if that weren't the case, I still think this would be my least reached for lip suede because these just aren't colors that I'm necessarily drawn to on an everyday basis. But with that being said, I think I'm going to use this one today. Westman Atelier does have a lip brush, but I don't have it, and I find this Spectrum KJH number 14 brush works really well as a lip brush. I'm actually going to start with this really deep shade first and use that as a little bit of a liner. So I've just taken that deeper burgundy shade and lined my lips with it and then kind of feathered and blended it into the lips. And now I want to go into this tomato red. Very bold. I'm going to try to tone it down a little bit actually with this one here, which as I mentioned is more sheer, although it's not supposed to be, but it might just do the trick for me today. I'm going to go in with my finger actually. All right, lips are finished, and I just want to finish up with a little bit more powder, so I'm going to use a natural hair brush this time, the Wayne Goss 03. Just take a little bit more powder and just kind of set right around the nose, the outside of the nose, a little bit around the lips and forehead. I'll just blend that bronzer a little bit more, soften it up. And actually I'd forgotten I wanted to try the Superloaded on my collarbone. So I'm gonna go in with the blender brush now and back with the Peau de Peche and just see how that works. So you can see the brush fits perfectly into that pan. Put it on the shoulders too. It gives a really beautiful kind of bronzy, perfected look to the skin. There we go. So this is the completed look. I always feel very polished when I wear Westman Atelier makeup, and although I don't necessarily put too much stock in clean beauty claims, my skin does feel good when I wear Westman Atelier makeup, and I particularly notice it when I wear their foundation. I find that this is one of the few foundation or concealer products that when I wash my makeup off at night, my skin almost feels better and smoother than it did before I applied the makeup, which is quite unusual. I really do think there are a lot of quite special products in this range. The presentation is always beautiful, and I think as time has gone on, the presentation has gotten only better. The gray component is, to me, not all that appealing, although there's certainly a sleekness and a beauty to the simplicity of this. The weight of the packaging is also very luxurious, and you know, the black, to me, not all that exciting. But as they've been coming out with more and more products, like the Mimi blush has this beautiful two-toned motif, which is really nice, and I love their reflective gold packaging. The different colors of the lit up highlight sticks in these kind of more exciting metallic packages. I know that the new Peau de Santé has come in a compact, sort of similar to the powder one, but a little bit more of a rose gold or a rose platinum type of shade, where this one is a warm silver, which is, again, to me, a really appealing presentation. Everything in this range, although yes, it is very expensive, it all has the luxury experience that you expect to have when you're paying that high price tag all around, in terms of the packaging, the weightiness of everything. These compacts are really heavy and satisfying to hold. Even the lip glosses have a beautiful weightiness. And then, of course, most importantly, the products perform very well for the most part. As I said, the iPods, in my opinion, aren't worth it, but I think everything else in the range that I've tried is really exceptional and really something special and something to enjoy and appreciate. So just to round up my thoughts on the powder, I think this is excellent. Presentation is wonderful. It comes in this little linen pouch. I've only used this, I think, 3 times. So in terms of comparing it to other powders, I'm not really ready to talk about that yet. I think I need to try this out a lot more to really see how it performs under different conditions with different types of makeup, to really put my full thoughts forward in terms of comparing it to other formulas. But right from the first few times I've used it, I can tell you that it's very finely milled. It looks really beautiful on the skin. It perfects the skin in an exceptional way. It only takes a little bit of product and it never feels dry or cakey at all. It's totally the opposite of that. It's really weightless, really fine, and makes your skin look poreless and tamps down a little bit of shine where you need to while still maintaining a really healthy radiance. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I always love to see those. And if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I would really love for you to do so. Thanks again so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.